Hey guys, Chris here, the RC Geek. Welcome to episode 3 in our series on foam kit bashing. We are currently bashing a Freewing Mirage 2000 into an Israeli Kafir. In our last episode, we covered the physical conversion process and built all of the unique parts that turned this airplane from a Mirage into a Kafir, and then we put it all together. As a part of that, we used 3D printing, employed some traditional building methods using foam and balsa wood as well. To see that video, you can click the icon in the upper right corner. I have a link there. Now in this episode, we're covering how to do some quick and easy pilot painting and cockpit detailing. Before prepping and painting the airframe, which we'll do in our next video, I really wanted to work out the cockpit interior first, especially since we need to pull the canopy off the airframe to do that. It's better to do it earlier in the process, just in case we mess something up. It's just an easier fix. Now the base cockpit provided with the Mirage 2000 is decent, but there are a few issues that we're going to fix. First of all, the pilot is just too small. Don't ask him to lend you money because he'll probably tell you he's a little short. So to solve this, we're going to replace him with a 1/12 scale Castle 5 bust, which comes from my folks at jethanger.com. And so we'll show you how to paint him. In case you don't know, I manufacture a whole line of jet pilots for my folks in sizes ranging from as small as 1/18 scale all the way up to 1/6 scale. So if you're looking for jet pilots, you keep that in mind. Now the second thing we're going to do is show you how to make the cockpit a little more popcorn proof, and then we'll detail it a little bit to make it a little more Kafir representative. The stock cockpit is black and inside a sealed compartment, and so it's already popcorned up. So let's go! Now painting a nice looking pilot is not a difficult thing to do really, and it's something that can be done pretty quickly. We first off need a selection of paintbrushes. I have a number of paintbrushes that I turn to when I'm painting a pilot. I'll use a wider kind of square brush for the large areas, and then we'll turn to much smaller brushes for the detail painting. Also, we need a selection of paints. The Castle 5 instructions show all the paints needed from the Testors Model Masters brand. Now, my philosophy in painting these is to paint deep to shallow. What I mean is that I'll paint the colors in the deeper recesses first, which include the primary flight suit and the helmet, and then I'll paint the individual details, painting the highest protruding details last. Don't worry about painting light to dark, except if you're doing a white helmet, definitely paint that first. Otherwise, paint as necessary to paint the details deepest to highest. And also, as I'm painting, I ensure that I overpaint all of the areas in the corners and whatnot so that there's none of the undercolor showing on the final product. That allows me to go back and touch up all the intersecting corners and lines with the other colors. Note too that if you accidentally overpaint one of the other colors, you can simply go back and touch it up with the necessary color. No big deal to do that. I do this a lot because rarely do you get it perfect the first time. So you go back, touch things up as necessary. It's not a problem. Now before any painting was started, I cleaned the pilot with some water, dried them off, and then used the Tamiya plastic model primer to spray over the bust. The primer is white, so I use that as the helmet color as well. From there, I painted the flight suit dark green, then I hit the pilot's undershirt with armor sand, and then the skin tone around his neck. From there, I went to the oxygen mask and all the pilot's flotation survival gear. I painted that olive drab, and then lastly, I painted the straps, and those were painted Euro 1 gray. And then the buckles, I painted those steel along with the oxygen mask clip details that are on the helmet. Once all the details are painted, I like to do some dry brushing, which really helps add a little dimension and realism to the pilot. If you're not familiar with that technique, it is the act of taking a brush that has had most of the paint wiped off of it with a paper towel and then brushing over a model with it. It leaves a small amount of residual paint over the details and gives the illusion of added depth. So you've got these creases in his flight suit, it'll pick all of that up, so in the creases you'll have darker colors versus on the highlights there. So you'll get this variation in color, which really helps with the realism. For pilot painting, what I do is I'll put a little bit of the base color that I used for painting onto the back of a paper cup. I'll mix in a little white to lighten it up, and then I'll use that lightened color to dry brush over that base color that I used on the pilot. That lightens all of the highlights on the pilot and then really makes it looked notably better. Experiment with different colors to get the desired look. Dry brushing is a very handy technique to have in your arsenal, so experiment with it. Now, with the dry brushing done, the last thing I did was to hand paint the squadron insignia on the patch on the right shoulder. Well, I should say that I attempted to paint it. The pilot has a small patch detail, so it's fun to try and paint different insignias and things on there. So I gave it a shot, came out just okay. So at this point, we've completed most of the paint on the pilot, but you probably noticed that we haven't painted the sun visor yet. Before painting the visor, I sprayed the whole pilot with a flat clear coat. What that does is it evens everything out and helps make all of that dry brushing and detail painting really pop. The very last thing done is then painting the visor, and I use a high gloss graphite metallic paint to do that, as it gives it a nice translucent appearance. If the finish on the visor isn't as high gloss as you'd like, you can paint Pledge Floor Care Finish over it. That's the new name for the old Future Floor acrylic. Also, some guys have had good success coating it with some 5-minute epoxy too, but make sure you don't get any air in it because you don't want air bubbles. So we have the pilot painted. All he needs now is a fresh new office to work in. The stock Mirage 2000 cockpit is a decent base to start with, and with a few extra goodies can be made into a nice enough looking cockpit. Unfortunately, it is painted black, and so mine had already swelled up and popcorn in some areas, so that had to be fixed, of course. What I did was simply cover all of the exposed areas with thin cardstock. This included all of the framing around the cockpit tub, the sides of the seat and the headrest, and then the instrument panel hood. I used 3M77 spray glue to tack it all down, but note that the cardstock that I use is about the thickness of an index card. So if you have index cards, you can use those too. You don't want it to be too thick or to be difficult to work with, and you won't be able to form it as needed. So what adding the cardstock does is hide all of that unsightly texture and will keep it from reappearing in the future, essentially making it popcorn proof. All of the cardstock was added to the tub first, and then the tub was painted aircraft gray. From there, all of the black cardstock elements were painted and then added separately. For the instrument panel, I found an image of a Kafir C7 panel and scaled it to fit the free-wing instrument panel. Again, spray glued on, but before doing that, however, the center section of that panel was cut out separately, and I glued that onto a piece of 1/8 inch balsa that had been painted black. This was to offset that center panel a little bit, give it a little dimension, just like what's in the full-size cockpit too. With everything in place, finalized all of the painting of the interior, including the seat. The seat's a Martin Baker Mark 10, so I found a picture online and used that for reference, and also took some artistic license too. Now, to finish it all out, I did, again, dry brushing all around like we did with the pilot, and then I clear coated it. Lastly, I added a HUD glass detail using some parts I had available from my A7. You can use some triangular cut pieces of sheet styrene to accomplish the same effect. And then obviously you need a clear piece of plastic for the actual HUD glass itself. With the cockpit tub completed, added the Castle 5 pilot in by gluing a balsa wood platform between the side walls of the tub and then gluing the pilot to it. And then from there, simply glued the canopy on with some RC56 canopy glue. Okay guys, there are some tips for quick and easy pilot painting and cockpit detailing. The intent here was just to cover some easy things that can be done that really make big differences in the looks of a model. I wanted to keep it simple, but still look the part really nicely. We'll touch on really detailed cockpit scratch building in another video when we get to that point on our competition Skyray build. For this Kafir, this cockpit is definitely good enough and is a huge improvement from the stock setup. So that's it guys. Thanks so much for watching. In our next episode, we're going to cover painting the airplane. We're going with an awesome 4-tone Israeli camouflage scheme, and so we'll show you how to achieve that. And if you'd like to do some homework in the meantime, we're going to prepare the airplane with polyacrylic and primer just like we did in our How to Refinish a Foam Warbird series. Also guys, full article on my blog, thercgeek.com as usual, with links to everything that we covered here. If you'd like to see my series on how to refinish a foam warbird, you can see that here, or if you'd like to see some of the other build tutorials we've done, you can see those here. Thanks so much for watching guys, and until next time, I'll see you at the field.